starring Bela Day in
But Ma, that's my favorite movie. Oh, well, all right. But don't you spend too much time in front of that TV, do you hear me? Yes, Ma. Howdy, everyone. Welcome back to my podcast, But Ma, That's My Favorite Movie. Thank you so much for tuning in to yet another episode of this podcast, which this one is titled, But Ma, That's My Favorite Musical Movie. So, if you haven't guessed it, we're going to be talking about musicals that have been turned into movies. Now, I must admit, I'm not a huge fan of musical movies because I prefer stories that are talking all the way through and do not break out into song to express their feelings or, experiences or situations that are happening. But at the same time, I do realize how important musicals are to the film industry as well. They are a big part and pretty popular amongst the masses. And so I know I do have some musical movies I do adore and do not mind watching. So I figured it would only be appropriate to do an episode based on this. And especially for all of my musical lovers. Anyone who loves musicals and theater, which I love theater, do not get me wrong. And I wish I had the vocals to sing, carry a tune, but I don't. So when I would do plays, I would just do normal plays because I can't sing and I don't have rhythm to save my life. And it's best for everybody, I don't want to scar anyone from seeing anything that, I would do on the stage as far as a musical. All right. So, I do want to say this. The two movies that I picked out, both of them are 80s movies. Now, it's funny because I don't always plan that, but sometimes it just happens. And so we're getting musical vibes and we're going to be getting some 80s vibes as well. And we know there are some great movies that came out of the 80s. So I'm actually pretty excited about that. And like I said, I did not plan it. But just super excited to, go over these particular musical movies that I do like, I grew up on, and that I feel are definitely necessary to mention in this musical world realm for sure. Definitely some popular ones. All right, something else I want to get out the way before we get into the movies, and I did mention this at the tail end of the last episode 6, part 2. No, I take that back because we're on episode 8. So this was episode 7, which was summer movies, talking about summer movies. And at the tail end, I, was giving some credit to IMDb. And I was mentioning how pretty much that website is like my Bible. That is the website I'm on every day besides Facebook. I'm always on IMDb, which stands for Internet Movie Database. So it has pretty much all of your needs and wants and all the information you'd want to know about any movie that has ever came out. It tells you about cast, it tells you about crew, it tells you about writers, it tells you dates when the movie came out. It tells you about budget amounts, like it tells you, trivia, things you wouldn't know. It tells you it outlines quotes from the movie. It tells you so much information, and I'm able to link so many different actors and actresses, from movie to movie because I can either search a movie and then try to find a person in it, or I can find a person and then search for what movies and see if they relate to who and what. And to me, it is one of the coolest websites that was ever invented. And I hope one day I would love to be sponsored by IMDb some way, some association with them. I would absolutely love that. And I would probably die because that is one of these sites that I absolutely love so freaking much. So yeah, so most of the stuff as far as trivia and just about learning about the actors and what they've been in and so on, all of that information is all there in one place. And so I'm able to access all of this. And, you could always go on there too and My boyfriend actually gets pretty irritated with me because anytime we watch a movie, I'll go, oh, they were in this movie. And then I have to double check myself because, of course, I want to make sure I'm right. And then I go there. And every time I do that, he's like, oh, my God, you don't have to go there to go check it. And I'm like, yes, I do. And so I do. And he gets so mad about it, which I don't get why. Why'd you be mad? That's so innocent. But anywho. All right, let's go ahead and just get right into these freaking movies. And let's do it. Lights, camera, action.
Nice plan. Big.
Shouldn't we be leaving now?
You're quite the little chatterbox tonight, ain't you?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, what?
Sorry, doctor. Sorry, doctor.
You gotta train him, huh, Stud?
The first movie we're going to be talking about today is Little Shop of Horrors. Okay, so that quote is actually the banter between Oren and Audrey. And I thought that was really cute. And Audrey was actually one of my favorite characters because I really liked her voice. She had one of those voices that was like really like made for doing voiceovers. Now I don't know if her real voice is actually like that because I could tell when she sang it sounded a lot deeper. But sometimes that happens. But I really did love her character when she did that. Or I love her character's voice and just like her outfits and everything about her. She was definitely one of my favorites. Okay, so this movie was released December 19th, 1986, which is cool because that particular day is my best friend Panda's and my cousin Haven's. That is the day that they were born. So I thought that was really cool. And let's go ahead and get into the summary here because, we want to know what the movie's about. And then we'll get into cast, director, and some trivia. And also talk about like my favorite songs in the movie and such. So let's go ahead and describe this movie. So this movie, first off, it starts off where we see Seymour and we see that he works at a plant shop that isn't getting any business. Okay, this plant shop is dead. There's no business from what we can see on this day. But we can obviously see that possibly they haven't had anything maybe all week, maybe month. The building looks almost abandoned. Inside looks dreary, outside looks dreary, looks like so much work needs to be done. It just looks dark and gloomy. And then everyone's, of course, attitude, because, you are what environment you're in. So you're in an environment that's not really kept up and, seems darker and has mute colors. It's going to change your mood. So Seymour works at this plant shop. Okay. And so we're learning a little bit about Seymour. One, you can tell he's not as happy with where he's at. I think in just his life in general. He doesn't seem like a super ambitious guy, but at the same time, you can tell that he would want more out of his life because of just like, they live on Skid Row. And everyone just on the block just doesn't seem very happy with where they live and would love to find some way out, but feel kind of stuck. And then another thing we learned about him is that he has a little bit of purpose because he has a crush on his coworker, Audrey. And we could tell when we see their first dynamic together is that he is a bit shy and she's a bit shy as well. And obviously we can tell he likes her. And then you can even kind of tell on her side that she may be liking him more than a friend as well. But she's being held back by the fact that she has a boyfriend and, she's loyal to whoever she is with. So going back to the dead plant shop, no pun intended. So it's so dead. There's no business. And the store owner, Mushnick, decides that, okay, y'all don't even have to come into work tomorrow. And of course, with them needing a job and them wanting to still work, Audrey tells Seymour to go get his plant that he had got because she seemed like this, strange plant that he had brought in at some point before. And Seymour brings the plant up. He shows Mushnick's. And at first Mushnick's like, okay, you got a plant. Like, what's the big deal? And Seymour has explained to him that, originally I thought this was a Venus flytrap. But in all of the books that I was looking in, I actually could not even find this particular plant anywhere. And just kind of giving you a visual of this plant, it does look similar to a Venus flytrap, but it looks more bulby. It's more rounder. It's more fuller, because Venus flytraps are, when their mouth is closed, it's real flat. But this one has more depth to it. And it does look very strange, something like you've never seen before. And so then Audrey begins to convince Mushnicks that having a strange and interesting plant in the window could bring in more business. And initially, Mr. Mushnicks is like, yeah, no way. Who's going to care about this freaking plant? Like, no one even knows what it is. Like, what are people, like, they're not going to care about it. And of course, Audrey is onto something, because back then it was, I think, really hip. It was more the way businesses were structured, were to have their advertisement was really whatever they had displayed in their windows that was, you know, either new items or items that were highlighted or popular in their store. And, you know, that's where the term window shopping comes from. Now, I know we see that a lot in the movies, but I feel like a lot of art mimics reality. So I'm pretty sure maybe 50s, 60s, 30s, 40s, that was a really popular advertisement form to, you know, display things in the windows. And this movie, I believe, takes place in like the 50s or 60s. That's like the time period anyways. So that would make a lot of sense. So, you know, with Audrey, you know, kind of explaining like, hey, this would, you know, draw people in. You know, Mr. Mushnicks is not originally sold on the idea. And also, I want to mention, Seymour actually names this plant Audrey too. Of course, in homage to the girl of his dreams, pretty much. And so Mr. Mushnicks is like, okay, whatever, put the flower in the window. And what do you know? As soon as it's in the window, the first customer of the day comes in, and the first thing he says is, oh my God, what is that strange, interesting plant in your window? And, you know, Mushnicks is shocked. They're all shocked that this plant had brought in a customer so fast. And then all of a sudden, all of these different customers start coming in. Oh, and what I wanted to say was, the first customer that comes in, when he sees the strange, interesting plant, he he comments on like, oh, the plant in the window. But then he also mentions, oh, well, you know, while I'm here, I need $50 worth of roses. He pulls out 100, asks Mr. Mushnicks if he has change for it. Of course he does not. And so then he's like, oh, well, I guess I got to buy $100 worth. And then they're all thinking, oh my God, $100 worth? Like, holy crap. And so, yeah, then going back to a bunch of customers were coming in. Business is booming, right? And so at one point, you know, the day is settled down or the day is winding down. And at one point, Mushnicks asks Seymour about the plant. Like, where'd you get this from? And so Seymour tells him the story that, you know, he was walking on the sidewalk. He came across this exotic, you know, plant shop, and they had some plants outside, but he didn't see anything he was quite interested in. So he crosses the street. He sees these group of guys singing somewhat of like a quartet. It was either 3 or 4 guys. Maybe 3. I think it was 3 guys. They were singing, and he kind of like tries to join them in doing it for some weird reason. And so then he, all of a sudden the sky goes dark. Well, the eclipse happened, and this eclipse actually like beams over the plant, which we know is Audrey 2 now. And when Seymour looks back across the street, he sees the exotic, plant area, but there's a plant on one of the tables that he did not see before when he was over there. So he's super fascinated by it. He gets it. The store shop owner of the exotic plant place, he sells them the plant for like super cheap, because he's like, I don't even know what this plant is either, but hey, if it's able to be sold, then why not? That's money in my pocket. And so that is the story of how he ended up coming across the plant to begin with. And so then, of course, the day is winding down, and Mr. Mushnicks and Seymour notice that the plant kind of like slumps over. It looks like it's starting to die. And Mushnick's immediate reaction is, you better stay here until you get that plant back alive, because without that plant, like, we're not going to have no business. And that is what is attracting our customers. And we need customers. So then Seymour spends like all night at the shop, because I think he lived right by the shop, or he lived in the basement of the shop, something like that. I was kind of a little confused about it. And so he's feeding it plant food. He's, giving it water. Nothing is helping it. And he's, this is when he breaks out into song. He's trying to figure out what's going on with this freaking plant. And then at one point he's picking up these roses that were on the floor, and he gets pricked by one of the thorns on the stems of the rose, and he begins sucking on his finger because he starts bleeding a lot. And when he starts doing that, all of a sudden the Audrey 2 raises itself up and starts making like the sound, like the sucking noise. And at first Seymour's kind of caught off guard, because he's like, wait, what is that? And the fact that the plant was doing that, he's like, what? And at first he's really confused by it. But then he eventually realizes it's like the plant wants his blood. Like, he somehow figures that out. And so he literally starts squeezing droplets of blood into the plant's mouth. And the plant's like eating it, like it's reviving it. Like, that's his water. And so he sees that this makes the plant come back to life. So he's like, okay, that was kind of weird, but okay. And so he leaves, and then the plant actually grows some more. And so this is what we're learning throughout the film, is that, the more he feeds this plant, because this plant from basically outer space is surviving off of blood. Like, that's not a normal plant. And it's also making this plant grow astronomically big, because of the source of his food. As we're going through the film some more, and he keeps feeding the plant, and we notice that, like, he's starting to feed the plant so much, like, he's pricking like literally every finger. So he has like bandages on all his fingers, because he realizes this is the only way to feed him. It's almost like a baby. He's having to, I don't want to say like drain himself, but I guess kind of drain himself in order to feed this, because he doesn't know any other way to do that, because he wants like human blood. Like, this plant is a freaking sci-fi vampire or whatever. But anyways, so yeah, he's having to feed it. And then of course this grows. I mean, this plant at one point grows to the height of him. And so as it's getting bigger, he realizes he can't keep feeding him just droplets of blood from his fingers. This plant needs way more. And plus, at one point, he is pretty much like drained. Like, I can't give you any more of my blood. Because, I mean, you as a human being can only lose so much blood. And so, at one point, the plant, he doesn't know a way that he can feed the plant until the plant literally starts talking. And he's basically like, feed me, Seymour. Like what we were saying, and he breaks into song. Because he's just talking about, like, you got to feed me, but I have an idea of what you can feed me. You can feed me some humans. And at first Seymour's like, oh my God, like, I cannot go around killing people to feed you. Like, that's absolutely freaking insane. And, the plant is really trying to convince him. And at first he's just like, no, like, that's out of the question. Until the plant puts Audrey's boyfriend into the situation. Now, why he puts him into the situation is because Audrey's boyfriend is this sadist dentist who beats on her. And so, okay, what better validation to kill someone is that they're not doing right in their life and they put harm to others. So, okay, it only makes sense that this person dies. So originally Seymour didn't agree to it, but after, realizing, okay, well, it's not bad if we kill someone who's a bad person, right? So then he decides, okay, I'm going to go ahead and kill her boyfriend. Now, mind you, her boyfriend is Oren. I actually really like that name, Oren. I don't know. I think that's pretty cute. But anyway, so he puts up the courage, gets the courage to go up to Oren's shop, or his dental business. And he is going to kill him so he can bring him to the plant to feed the plant, because the plant needs to eat. And so, we're learning, and we see Oren's environment, how he treats his patients, and how he thrives off of the pain that his patients feel. You know, most people have a fear of going to the dentist. I preferably don't. It's just like, I don't know, you just feel like the worst can happen going to a dentist or, you know, doctors. And a lot of people have phobias of that. And so he basically just really thrives off of, you know, the fear and the pain that he brings his patients. So, you know, he's kind of, you know, weird. And so Seymour decides he's going to go up to his dentist practice and kill him. And at one point, Oren, and he does this throughout the movie, he puts on this laughing gas to help. I guess it's almost like when you're trying to have a good time, you want to drink or you want to smoke. Well, using laughing gas, that's his drug of choice, okay? So he has this laughing gas on, and he does this because, you know, before he starts to go into his really like sadist acts on people, you know, that helps him like loosen up and relax. And so at one point, Seymour doesn't even have to kill him because Oren kills himself by having, you know, the gas mask on, and it's like this whole contraption where it's like something that he puts like over himself, and he has to like, you know, there's a way he has to like reach back and like turn it off, and he ends up like breaking whatever it is that he would have to use to turn it off. So it just keeps going on. He, you know, of course he keeps laughing because it's laughing gas, and then he ends up dying from it because, you know, you can only intake so much of that in your body. And so of course, it's, you know, Oren did the hard part for Seymour. So Seymour ends up, you know, dragging his body out of there, and he brings it up to the shop. And then it's funny because the plant is like, you got to chop his body up. I guess it's easier for me to digest. Like, this plant is a freaking mess. And so then he ends up, you know, going to chop the body up. And of course he's hesitant about it and completely out of his comfort zone. And at one point, Mushniks is near the shop when he notices like some commotion and stuff going on, and he actually ends up seeing what Seymour does to Oren. Okay, and so then of course later in the movie, Seymour gets confronted by Mushniks because he's just like, I saw what you did, so basically you need to, well, at first he says, I'm gonna call the police on you, but then he goes, well, you know what, how about I don't call the police on you, like I give you a break and you just leave town and never come back, but you have to keep this plant here because he knows this plant is making him money. And at this point, this plant is taller than like the both of them, okay? This plant is huge. And so as Mushniks is giving him this ultimatum, the plant is actually behind both of them. So Seymour can see the plant, but Mushniks has his back to the plant. And so the plant ends up devouring him. So that ends up being his next freaking meal. And then after that happens, pretty much Seymour becomes a celebrity because, you know, everyone knows his attachment to the plant. And so they're offering him shows, lecture, tour deals. I mean, just so many things are being thrown at him that are, you know, of course, making him rich and famous. And Seymour's not really about that, and that's not like his goal in life, to become famous and known. And so a lot of it feels like a lot of pressure to him. And I mean, he's just going along with it, but it's not something he truly wants, and he begins to realize that. So anyways, after all of that, I mean, pretty much what ends up happening is, of course, since that plant ends up getting so freaking huge, at one point, he's going to have to defeat the plant because it's grown so big, and because of its intelligence, like, this plant can articulate itself, this plant is strong, he's able to overpower Seymour. So Seymour has to find a way to kill that mofo, okay, before he gets a little too crazy. All right, so this musical, this actually premiered off Broadway in 1982. Now, I was kind of curious because I was like, what is off Broadway? So basically, off Broadway is where performances are held in smaller theaters. And then, of course, the next version up will be Off-Broadway, which would seat fewer than 100 people. And then, of course, we have Broadway, which would seat hundreds of people. So I guess instead of things being considered just like plays or just regular theater, there's like different versions of it before you get to Broadway itself. So I thought that was pretty cool. And Off-Broadway actually started in 1958. And it makes a lot of sense why this musical started off on that particular stage because of the content of it. And one thing I will say about this musical is cool. I appreciate the idea of it. Is it my favorite? Like, I just have memories of just watching it and thinking it's really cool. And the graphics were pretty freaking awesome. Of course, because it came from the studios of Jim Henson, who did, The Labyrinth and Dark Crystal, and, just that puppeteering that they did with different creatures is just simply amazing. So the graphics for that time was great. The story idea is great. So overall, I mean, it's a really entertaining, musical to see. Some of the favorite songs in this particular musical, I loved Dennis, which is sung by Oren. I really like that song because it just basically displays all his sadism and, how he thrives off the fear of his patients and all of that. I love the prologue song, which talks about the Little Shop of Horrors. It sings the song and, what it's about. And then I also like Mean Green Mother from Outer Space. That is sung by Audrey too. That's a really good song. So they have a couple songs in here that I did enjoy. There were some songs that I didn't really care for, but those are the main ones I liked. And then just to go over, before we get to trivia, like the cast and director and stuff. Okay, so this movie was directed by Frank Oz, and a lot of his works he worked on Star Wars movies, and he did a lot of stuff with Muppets. And so that was like kind of like the bulk of the main things that I saw that he did. And then cast, we have Rick Moranis, who plays Seymour. And of course, he was in the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids series. He played in the Flintstones. And then he was just really popular in like the 80s and 90s. And then we have Eileen Green, who plays Audrey. She played in movies like The Cooler and One Fine Day. Then we have Vincent Gardenia, and he played in Moonstruck, Death Note. And then we have Steve Martin, which was really cool to see him, again, because I haven't really seen him in a movie in a while. And he's playing Roxanne, Bowfinger, Pink Panther, Cheaper by the Dozen. Of course, Steve Martin is, one of the comedians of our time that everyone knows and respects dearly. We have Tashina Arnold, who plays in the show Martin, played the mother in Everybody Hates Chris. We have Michelle Weeks, and pretty much this was her claim to fame movie for sure. We have Tisha Campbell Martin, who I talked about her in episode 2, Party Movies. So of course she was in House Party. She played in Martin as well. We have Jim Belushi. He played in Jingle All the Way, and then like a bunch of different like TV series. You can tell he starred in as well. We have John Candy, who was like super popular in the 80s. He played Uncle Buck, Spaceball, Splash, a whole bunch of other ones. Bill Murray played in Lost in Translation, Life Aquatic, Ghostbusters, Groundhog Day, and of course, everyone knows Bill Murray. And we have Levi Stubbs, who does the voice for Audrey too, and he was actually the baritone in the group The Four Tops, which I believe was actually the lead singer in all of the songs for The Four Tops. And he did some voice acting on some TV series. And if you're curious about The Four Tops and songs that they did, they have hits like Reach Out, I'll Be There, Baby I Need Your Lovin', I Can't Help Myself, Sugar Pie Honey Bunch. I sounded like an infomercial when I said that. Baby, I need your loving. I can't help myself. Okay, so so some trivia here. So, okay, when I was talking about one of the songs I liked was Mean Green Mother from Outer Space. That song is the first Oscar nominated song. It is the first Oscar-nominated song to contain profanity, which I was a little surprised about too. But this movie, it's like the content is kind of mature and then obscure and a little raunchy. So, I mean, it's fitting for it, but it's cool that got nominated for an Oscar. But the song that they played for the Oscar was edited, and, you know, they replaced some of the risque lyrics that they had cut from the final film. But the original version was included on the soundtrack. Then Frank Oz, he originally... So there's this Greek chorus, which, you know, it has Tanisha Arnold, Tisha Campbell, and Michelle Weeks. And each one of their names, there's Crystal, Ronette, and Chiffon. And so originally the director wanted to have like this spotlight on them whenever they appeared, which actually sounds like a really good idea. But sometimes some things sound better on paper than they do when you actually try to bring them to life, because that actually proved to not be practical at all, because it would basically spill onto the actors. So it probably created all sorts of like shadows and stuff that just didn't look very good on camera. So at one point, he did actually was able to have them magically remain dry during a rainstorm in one of the title numbers, which was the beginning one in Little Shop, when they sing Little Shop of Horrors. And I remember looking at that scene, I said, oh my God, like how? I was like, they're not wet at all. Because I was like, when it started raining hard, I was like, okay, their hair is going to fall and, you know, they're going to be all soaking. But nope, they were dry the whole time. So this is the only movie that contains Steve Martin and Bill Murray in the same movie. So I don't think they've ever been in any other movie together. So that was pretty cool. Now, the members of the Greek chorus that I just spoke about are based on, well, named after 50, 60 girl groups, which was the Ronettes, the Chiffons, and the Crystals. And I thought that was super cool. Now, the puppeteers who designed and operated Audrey 2 were veterans of the Jim Henson Company. So, okay, I said earlier that this was a part of Jim Henson Company because I saw so much of that, so I assume, but probably not. So I'll probably retract that. And so it looks like they just had people that worked in his company, so they knew that style and they knew how to, you know, work stuff like that. But one of the operators was Brian Henson, which was Jim's son. Okay, so the filmmakers originally offered the role of Audrey to Cyndi Lauper before they had cast the stage star Ellen Greene. So Lauper, she did want to be a part of it, but obviously she could not commit because she was recording, she was touring, and she had a busy schedule that wouldn't allow her to be able to, you know, schedule shooting a film as well. And they were also considering Madonna for the role. So just imagine what this movie would have been if it had one of those stars in it. Okay, now this came out in 1986. And this was actually the most expensive movie Warner Brothers had ever produced. So they had a budget of $25 million. And it even surpassed Aliens, which came out that same year. They had a budget of only $18 million. And this was shot in an adjacent stage at Pinewood Studios. So they were actually shot across from each other, literally. Okay, and then these scenes were actually all filmed at Pinewood Studios in England. And this was actually the largest studio set in the world, the 007 stage. And they actually did not want to shoot on location because they felt like it would ruin the fantastical mood of the film. So part of this stage was used to film the Suddenly Seymour number, but due to its size, the stage was impractical to heat properly, and then it caused condensation to appear. So it was too cold on the set, and we know what happens like when you're in the cold air and you breathe in it, you know. And so they actually, to counteract that, they had to put ice cubes in their mouth, which is kind of funny, but yeah. All right. And you know what? That is all we got for that film. All right. So let's get into the second movie we have here. Lights, camera, action.
Hey, Zindler, you ain't forgot you was gonna take us to the chicken ranch, did you?
Yeah! How about it,
I always
Senator?
keep my campaign promises.
And that quote is by the Senator Wingwood in the movie. which I swear that quote took me out. That was too funny. Okay, so let's go ahead and go into the summary of this movie here. Then, of course, we'll, do what we did before. Okay, so in the beginning of this movie, we're getting the backstory of this whorehouse, aka the Chicken Ranch, which is located in Gilbert, Texas. Now, is Gilbert, Texas a real place? I don't know. But originally the sheriff of Gilbert was Jack Roy Wallace, and he actually picked out this house for Miss Woola Jean in 1910. And I guess she was like working out of a hardware store, and so that's why he picked out the house for them. So then they had this nice cozy house where pretty much what they were doing in the hardware store, they're able to, do in the house. And so, pretty much some people in the town, they knew about the house because, of course, they enjoyed the house somewhat. A lot of people enjoyed it. And I think there were some people that were either oblivious to it or just choose to ignore it. But it was, pretty much a staple in that town. And Woola Jean was a type of a house madam that kept a tight ship, and she didn't make sure that her girls were, running around all over the place and, making, their place look bad. For the most part, they wanted to keep everything under wraps, quiet, and those who knew, and those who, didn't necessarily approve of it, or they didn't want people who would approve of it, that wouldn't approve of it to, know about the establishment and what they were doing there. The house ended up becoming one of the best known pleasure palaces in all of Texas. They were getting so much business and everything, was doing so good in the house. And then at one point, there was like this Hoover depression, which I'm not sure what that is, but one of those happened. And it actually caused the, the patrons that came in there, they were hard up on cash. And of course, they still wanted their, vices and pleasures. And so they started, offering poultry, chicken, as payment. And the house was like, okay, we'll accept it. You can eat with some chicken, you can do some stuff. And so it eventually became a part of payment. So they're like, okay, well, we could raise some chickens, and I don't know if they were eating them or selling them or, whatever, they could do with them. But obviously it was enough resource or a resource that seemed viable enough that they were like, okay, we can accept it. And so that's when the house got the name, the Chicken Ranch. So they weren't calling it the whorehouse. They were calling it the Chicken Ranch, okay? But everyone knew what was going down there. So Woola Jean, she ended up dying, and she left the Chicken Ranch to her most favorite girl, Mona Stangley, who continued her legacy by, running everything like it was, keeping the type shit, keeping just, business as usual, nothing changing. And Chef Roy Wallace had passed away as well, and then the new sheriff became Ed Earl. And he was a pretty good sheriff. He kept everything in order. He enjoyed his social time. It seemed like sometimes it's like he would work, but he would do stuff to get out of work. But because it was such a small town, there wasn't a lot of crime and stuff happening. But he did have quite the temper, which we learned throughout this movie. And then we also learned that Mona and Ed Earl had quite the entanglement that no one knew about because they were keeping it secret, because, they just don't want to confuse things, because people already look at Mona a certain way, and they don't want to, add in the equation, the sheriff is sleeping with the, house mother. And so they had a really good dynamic, and they were actually pretty cute. And at one point, we see them together, and of course when they meet up, it's to what we call today, the friends with benefits, And so at one point, like they break into song, and one of the songs that they break into, this is actually one of my favorites in the film. I really enjoy it. And as they get to a point where they're gonna get it on, they end up getting interrupted by the deputy, who lets Ed know that, the mayor really needs to talk to him. And so, of course, they don't end up, finishing their little rendezvous because, you know, the deputy came in and interrupted him. And so, you know, Ed just ends up going up to his office. He meets up with the mayor. The mayor's like, hey, there's this dude named Melvin P. Thornton, and apparently he's supposed to be doing some special on the chicken ranch. And of course the chicken ranch, you know, prostitution or anything like that is not legal. You're not supposed to be doing that. So that's kind of like the town's little secret. And so, of course, they don't want that having national attention. And so, originally, Ed Earl, he's not really fazed by it because he's like, okay, he's this dude on television. What can he really do? And so, just to kind of, you know, cross his T's, dot his I's, he decides to call some people like, you know, up in the political realm and, you know, tries to pull these strings and say, hey, you know, can you stop this guy from like saying anything? Like, I don't really take it serious, but oh well. But, you know, still for precaution. And so all these people are like, yeah, I can't do that. And it seems like they're all a little hesitant to be in a place to try to tell him to stop doing something that he wants to do. So you can tell he's respected, and, you know, people know his popularity and just really, and I think it could be a thing that because he digs up dirt, like on just different places and establishments, they don't want him to do that to them if, you know, if they cause him any trouble per se. So originally Ed is like, okay, that's kind of weird. Why does nobody not want to do anything? So he's like, okay, well, I'll just go talk to the guy myself. So he goes down to, you know, the TV station that airs his show. He starts speaking to Melvin. Initially, Melvin seems like a pretty good guy. So he's like, okay, well, you know, he's talking to him. Melvin seems pretty reasonable because he's basically trying to say like, hey, you know, let's just not talk about it. And, you know, there's nothing really to talk about. And so, you know, Melvin seems like, oh, okay, blah, blah, blah. Like, he just seems harmless. And so at one point, Melvin's like, okay, I gotta go, you know, out to my show, but you can go sit in like the box area and, you know, just enjoy the show and, you know, let me know what you think. And so, you know, Ed goes up to, you know, where he can, you know, watch the show from above. And literally as soon as Melvin gets on stage, he immediately begins to expose the chicken ranch and, you know, lets everyone know that basically there's a whorehouse in Texas. So there's a house that is, you know, doing some illegal activity, and everybody needs to know about this. And so it catches Ed completely off guard. And then not only does Melvin expose that, but he also ends up pointing out the sheriff. It's like, and even the sheriff, he's here and he knows about it. So he's like, oh, wow, no, that's too crazy. So, like, Ed leaves. And so then after this, it becomes a mission for Melvin. Because, like, this is his story he wants to break. This is what he wants people to know about because he wants to get it shut down. And, you know, originally Ed is thinking this guy's nothing to worry about. But then he realized, okay, he could be a real threat because he has a popular show that a lot of people watch. And, you know, they don't need any of that coming to their small town that doesn't have any trouble. And so at one point, Melvin actually comes up to the town. He's, you know, trying to like speak to the people there. And, you know, he wants to go to the chicken ranch. And Ed ends up telling him off. He loses his temper because he's like, pretty much that's his way of dealing with stuff. He just goes off on people, okay? And so when he goes off on him, he doesn't realize that he's been taped. Because when he goes off on Melvin, and Melvin ends up leaving town, he's thinking everything's okay. But ends up finding out that, you know, he airs the blow up, or Melvin airs the blow up that Ed had when he went off on him. And so, of course, this, you know, the higher ups in town, like, you know, the mayor and stuff are like, okay, you're making our town look bad. Our reputation doesn't look good. Because if we have nothing to hide, why would we be so angry about it? Why would our sheriff be so angry, you know? And so they're trying to like pressure him to just like shut down the chicken ranch. So like, you know, if he can talk about all he wants, but if he has no proof, then there's nothing really, there's no validity to what he's saying. And so at first Ed's like, he's the type of person, don't tell me what to do. Like, I will do what I want to do. But he ends up taking that advice and he reaches out to Mona and he's just like, yeah, just shut it down. Like, let's wait till everything cools off. So then at one point, it's this is around Thanksgiving time, and Mona agrees to shut it down, but she forgets that there's this like annual visit that's done by the Aggies. The football team, the Oklahoma football team. And so they come like every year, and she's like, okay, well, I'll shut it down, but like, we'll just close it off to, public customers, but just have them come in because, we don't want to disappoint them. So she does that. And then of course, that is where, everything blows up. Nothing good happens from it. Okay. And this is a really fun movie. This is a really great movie. And this is a movie, this is one of the musicals that I like I like the majority of the songs on it. So I enjoy it. I own this movie. I definitely grew up on it. Okay, so I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but this was released July 23rd, 1982. Okay, the director is Colin Higgins. He directed Foul Play and 9 to 5, which 9 to 5 came out in 1980. And so this means that he previously worked with Dolly Parton. And Dolly Parton, she plays Mona. She also played in Still Magnolias, Joyful Noise, 9 to 5. And Dolly Parton is a famous country singer, okay? She's a famous country singer. And then we have Burt Reynolds, played in Striptease, Boogie Nights, Smokey and the Bandit, and of course other movies. We have Dawn DeLuise, played in Blazing Saddles, which I believe I've never seen that movie, but I think it has some like racism themes in it. Because I remember I was working at one job and someone was playing on the TV, because I worked at like it was like Netflix, but it was like a outsourced company for it. But anyways, and someone was like, no, that movie's like, I guess the racist themes are very strong. I don't know, I've never seen the movie. But anyways, he also played in the Cannonball Run, did a voice in All Dogs Go to Heaven. And what I know him from, and when I heard his voice, I remember it in Fievel Goes West, because he plays like the cat, I think. Then we have Charles Dunning. He played in Dog Day Afternoon, Tootsie, Oh Brother Where Art Thou, and The Muppet Movie. Jim Neighborgs played in The Andy Griffin Show and Stroker Ace. Then we have Therese Merritt. She played in The Wiz. She played in Waterboy. Ray Lee Bond, Pennies from Heaven, and Postman Always Ring Twice. Now keep in mind, I say some of the cast members, but of course there's a bunch of other ones, but these are kind of like the main players. So my favorite songs that I enjoy in this musical are 20 Fans, Little Bitty Pissant Country Place, Little Bitty Pissant Country Place, Sneaking Around with you, doing what lovers do, sneaking around with you. And then the Watchdog Report, Texas Has a Whorehouse in It, Texas Has a Whorehouse in It, Lord have mercy on our souls. And then Hard Candy Christmas. And those are the main ones that I enjoy listening to. And I will tell you this. Sneaking Around, I referenced earlier when I was saying that Mona and Ed were having their rendezvous. They break out into that song, Sneak Around With You. And I got chills listening to Little Bitty Pissant Country Place and Sneaking Around. I don't know why, but I guess those songs, like, it's just the beat is good, the sound is good, of course the visuals, the dancing, and I don't know what it is, but like, yeah, it definitely gave me chills listening to those. And so yeah, those are ones I enjoy, but pretty much all of them have like, they're very entertaining, they have a good beat, they have a good sound to them. So overall, I really did enjoy, the songs in this movie. What I thought was crazy is this movie is actually based on a true story. And this movie got its name from a 1974 article in a Playboy magazine that talked about a story about a whorehouse in Texas. And then, of course, from there they had made, the Broadway musical. And so the musical version in the movie is really based on a series of news reports about the house that they talked about in the original article. That was actually in LaGrange, Texas, and how there was a Houston reporter named Martin Zindler who broke the story and made it national news. Now, Martin actually alleged that the Attorney General was investigating that the house was partaking in original crime, and then also alleged that Sheriff T.J. Flournoy was taking money from the house in order to allow it to, keep having its business. And the original house, or the original the real life house madam, her name was Edna Melton, and she actually denied that there was any organized crime, and she just felt like she had girls there that were just out there making a living, like not doing anything more. And so some trivia here. The Chicken Ranch, the house that they used, it went on to be the Firefly Residence in the House of 1,000 Corpse that came out in 2003. Like, I mean, to go from something light like that, well, kind of light and risque to risque and dark. The original Broadway production of The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas had opened at the 46th Street Theater on June 19th, 1978, and it ran for 1,500 performances. 1,584 performances. And the musical in which the movie was based, it was nominated for a 1979 Tony Award for Best Musical and the 1979 Tony Award for Best Book of a Musical. Now, this was actually the most successful movie musical of the 1980s. And then, so Martin Zindler, which Melvin P. Thorpe is based on, he liked the play that was done about it, but he did not like the movie. Zindler basically was saying that he never had the intention of getting the, I think they called it a bordel, something like that. So they didn't say like whorehouse, they called it like a bordel. But he said he never had any intentions of getting it closed down. His thing was if there was organized crime, he wanted that to stop. And he didn't want, officials partaking in it and allowing it to happen in his city. Or in that city. So that was his big hoop about it. He didn't want to try to like take it down or anything. So that's what he didn't like about it. Now, okay, I didn't realize this. Well, I knew about this, but I didn't realize this song was in this movie. I Will Always Love You. Of course, it was written. If you didn't know this, it was written by Dolly Parton. Now, it's famously performed and sung by Whitney Houston, but that is not her song. I Will Always Love You is Dolly Parton's song, okay? Now, she had composed and released this song, I Will Always Love You, years before this movie. But she actually performed in this movie. And when I heard it, because I don't remember hearing it in this movie, but I heard it, I was like, oh my God, that was so cool. Because everyone knows Whitney Houston's version, but a lot of people don't realize this was Dolly Parton's song, and just basically Whitney Houston took the song and, really made it a hit, made it a song everyone knows about. But Dolly Parton is definitely get her coin for that. So not only did that, help Whitney's career, but that helped Dolly's too. And Dolly's getting a big fat coin for it. Because writers get the coins for it. But there was a song, A Cowboy's Way and A Gamble Either Way, that were written specifically for this movie, despite being released on her personal albums instead of appearing in the movie. So Dolly Parton wrote a lot of movies, exclusive or original songs for this movie that didn't actually make the cut. But she was able to perform I Always Love You, which was cool. The song A Hard Candy Christmas, which I mentioned, was one of my favorites that she sings in this movie as well. It actually, because I was wondering, I was like, what is that like referring to? Hard, like, it sounds like something disappointing, but I didn't get the reference. But what that means is, of course, to be disappointed or down. That's what's just the sentiment of it. But basically, filled candies were not as available in the 1930s through the 1950s as they are today, because they were actually more expensive. And children usually got chocolate covered filled candy at Christmas time, and that was a treat. And if you didn't have a lot of money, normally your go-to was to get the cheap hard candies, which of course kids, their treat, they would rather get that than like hard candies. I guess they weren't as good. So I was like, oh, that's an interesting reference. I feel like you get the idea of it when you hear the song, but knowing that kind of like, oh, okay, that adds more meaning and I guess value to how disappointed. Because, when you're a kid and you get disappointed about stuff, like, it feels like the end of the world. So, you can kind of get that. Now, let's see. Okay, last thing I got here. Since Dolly Parton knew that she was going to be starring opposite of Burt Reynolds, she came up with the idea to actually have Miss Mona and the sheriff be romantically involved. At first, she faced a lot of criticism because, you know, that wasn't true to the story. The real story, the sheriff and, you know, the madam did not have any relationship. So, of course, the screenwriter and the critics were not really, like, hip to it or really liked the idea. But, of course, it ended up being in the film, and it just worked. And that's why you say based on a true story, because you're not going exactly for how the story went. You're just taking, you know, main pieces of it. All right, and let's see. You know what? That is all I got. I'm making sure I'm not missing anything. But that is all I got for this movie here. And what I want to do really quickly, of course, I want to thank, you know, all of my listeners. If you are a returning listener, thank you so much for, you know, sticking around and still, you know, listening to my podcast. And if you're a new listener, welcome. And I'm so glad that you were able to join me in this episode. And hopefully you continue to listen to more. And then, of course, like I always say, if you're a returning listener, you're a real one, period, you know? And, of course, do not be afraid to, you know, tell a friend or maybe a stranger about this podcast, you know? Anyone that you know that's into movies, like, yeah, let them know. And also, if you have any, you know, movie suggestions or anything like that, you know, we have the butmathatsmyfavoritemovie at gmail.com. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram. And yeah, that's pretty much all I got. All right, you know what? The credits are rolling. The show is over. And you know what? I will see you at the next showtime. Bye.